Hello everybody and welcome to Mr. Stansfield's Education Videos. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to put together the multiple exposure self-portrait. So we have these three photos here from Allie. If we hit the spacebar in Bridge, that'll give us a full screen. We can look through these. These two images here, Allie's talking to herself over on one side of the frame, and then over here she's working diligently on her laptop. So the good news is that Allie's separated herself pretty easily. This should come together pretty easily. Because of the way that they're spaced out. There's no overlapping that needs to happen. Overlapping gets a little bit more complicated, and we can kind of go into some of the more advanced tools for making selections and getting our layer masks to be really precise. But today we're going to be taking a look at sort of the basics for this project. A couple of notes. One would be, I noticed as I was looking at three photos that these two, the camera is stock still. It's not moving at all. Now there is a little bit of a difference between these two. There's these people walking in the background and the tree over here is moving a little bit. But this image over here, the camera did shift ever so slightly. And so we're going to have to play around in Photoshop with that. And as a result, what I'm going to suggest that we do is add this layer as the top layer when we put the blending together. The other thing I wanted to notice is that there's a very slight color shift between these three images. So our solution for something like that, shoot with a preset white balance or choose a custom white balance before you shoot. Or shoot in RAW and then process using the same white balance settings before you bring them into Photoshop, whether it's from Adobe Camera Raw and Bridge or exported from Lightroom, either way. In this case, it's not going to be that big of a deal. The slight color shift is super subtle, and so not that big of a deal. So let's go ahead and open these. I'm just going to go ahead and select these and double click to open them up in Photoshop. Here it says, do you want to convert the document or use the embedded? Since we're working in Adobe RGB, the camera captured in sRGB. We're going to convert to Adobe 1998, and we'll do that for all three of these files. Now you can see that I had this other image actually already open. I'm going to close that without saving, and then I'm going to open that image again. So I think this was the one that we were missing. Yes, so go over here, double click it, and then now we've got all three files. Now if I press the F key till I can see these tabs here, we can actually click through those images. I was using the shortcut key Command tilde to cycle through these images. So if you hold the Command key and then hit tilde, it'll actually cycle through those images that you have open. It's a really useful shortcut key. What I'm going to do, like I said, I want this image to be my top layer, so I'm going to bring it in last. Let's just go ahead and build everything off. Let's actually go left to right. So this will be my base layer, and then I'll go ahead and click and drag this tab down here, get the Move tool, and then click and drag this image over here. Now if I hold the Shift key down before I let go, it'll automatically paste that image in perfectly aligned. So you can see these two layers over here, background and layer one, are looking pretty good. If I go to Window and then click on that number 4 again, I can close that without saving it so I don't have too many windows open. And then I'll add this multiple exposure 6, same deal, click and drag, hold the Shift key, and it'll paste it in right there. Command tilde again is the shortcut key to get to that image, and then I'll close that image right there. So here we go, layer 2 is on top, that's what I want. We'll deal with aligning that perfectly in just a second. Let's go ahead and start with layer 1 here. And basically what we're gonna do is add a layer mask. Now because these two layers are perfectly aligned, I'm not too worried about doing that. I'm going to go ahead and add a layer mask to this layer. Now, in between these two exposures, it looks like there may have been a little bit of a shift with the tree branches up here. So we may want to account for that. Essentially, what we're going to do here, though, is this background layer, this is the image on the background layer on the left, and we could do a couple of things here. The thing that I like to do is actually go ahead and just use a gradient. If we hit G on the keyboard, that's going to give our shortcut key, but this is the gradient tool. And what we want to do is click on Basics or double click on here, and we want to use foreground to background. We could choose black to white. We could choose foreground to transparent. There's a couple of options here, but essentially what we want to do is drag between these two places where we know Allie is here. So what I'm going to do is sort of drag from where I just saw the edge of her hand to the edge of her kind of phone right there. Oops, and I went the wrong way. If we look right here, it creates a gradient between black and white, and then that space there is kind of this blurry line. So what I'm going to do is actually do that again. I'm going to undo that, and I'm just going to drag the opposite way. Okay, and there, There we go. So here's the gradient that goes in between here. And I bet if we zoom in, I think I may have gotten a little bit of Allie's foot into the transparency zone right there. Yes, I would expect that. That is not as solid as I want it to be. Yes, you can see it starts to disappear just a little bit. So what I would do is get the brush tool, make sure I'm normal, opacity 100, flow 100, smoothing, bring our smoothing up, and then I would paint with the side over here, in this case black. Remember, D on the keyboard will default to foreground, background, white, and black, and then the X key switches, so then I can paint with a black brush. Now, if we look carefully here, we can see that there's a little bit of a shift and a little bit of a double image happening in the background here, right, with those tree branches. Now, if anybody's looking super carefully at those tree branches, they might notice it. I don't think we need to be too worried about it. The table looks pretty seamless. I think that works okay. Allie's shadow is coming in here, which I think works well. You know, if we were really worried about that tree branch, we could just, again, paint with black or white. In this case, I'm just going to paint with black. I'm going to fill this sort of space in over here just to kind of make sure that that's working okay. And it seems to be working fine. Right? So there is the first blend. Super easy using the gradient tool. And then we just painted in some of these spots right here with the brush tool to make sure that they were fully kind of integrated. Now, if we needed to paint some of the white back, we could do that too, but I think we're getting Allie's shadow in over here, so we're in good shape. Okay, let's add this last layer. And then what we're going to do is select the layer and change the layer blending mode to difference. And what we notice is that there is a slight halo around everything. If we were to go over here, turn this layer mask off and change this layer to difference, there's a lot less of that sort of glow or halo because everything is much more closely aligned. So the difference blending mode will change the way that this layer is viewed. And what we want to do is use that to our advantage to try to align the space in between the layers. So with the Move tool selected, again, the shortcut key is V. If we click on layer 2 here and then use the arrows, we can actually shift the layer around. And what we're looking for is as little of this effect, right? The sort of lot of white haloing. I'm sort of going out of my way to move that layer by using the arrow keys on the keyboard. So what we want to do is actually line up the spaces, especially where we think that that gradient's going to go. I'm sort of looking at the edge of the table where I think that gradient's probably going to end up making a difference. Or I could sort of think about this a little bit from the perspective of like, instead of using the gradient now, let's just use a paintbrush. So I'm going to go ahead and change this back to normal after I've lined everything up. And we can see that that's lined up a little bit better. And for this image, what I'm going to do is add a layer mask and then fill it with black. And then I'm going to use the paintbrush to paint this Allie in with white. So you can go Edit Fill, Shift F5 is the shortcut key, Contents black. There's a couple of shortcut keys that you could use for that too. But just in the for time's sake, what I'm going to do is just kind of cruise through here. So fill it with black and then hit D on the keyboard. That'll get you your black and white. Get the brush tool, and I'm going to use a nice big soft brush. Okay, so over here, I'm going to go somewhere around 900 pixels, maybe 400 or 500. And then I want to make sure I'm hardness at 0. And then I'm just going to start painting in here where I know Allie is, where I know Allie's shadow is, where I know the reflection of Allie on the table is, right? We want kind of all of that information in there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do this, get our toesies, make sure the shadow's in there, maybe the whole kind of table is in here, but we want those people in the background over here, and we don't want, any of these we don't want to worry about that thing that happened with the branches back there. So I'm going to hit the Option key and Option click on the layer, and then, let's fill in the table where we know we missed it. So if the paintbrush isn't quite working the way that you want it to, you can change your smoothing. In this case, my smoothing is turned kind of way up. I can turn that smoothing down. It's going to be sort of more of a definitive or assured paint. So here's before and after, and then here's without the layer mask, and then with the layer mask. So I'm going to paint that shadow in here a little more. Okay, there we go. So that's the basics of this, right? You want to create a layer mask on each layer, align them, and then use the paintbrush or the gradient tool to kind of fine tune it. Now, if you had something where you were overlapping, you'd have to zoom way in, get a small brush, kind of really paint the edge really carefully. But because of the way that Ali set this up, it's going to be pretty easy to put it together. If you're separated and spread out like this, it should be pretty easy, pretty straightforward. So there it is. If you are doing some overlapping, you can do some selecting we've talked about using the selection tool, creating layer masks from selections. You can fill a selection with black or white if you have the layer mask selected. There are a lot of ways of doing this really, really precisely. This is if you've got those kind of cells spread out a little bit more and you're able to use the gradient tool or just the paintbrush, aligning the layers first using the difference blending mode on the layer or the layer mask. Okay, good luck. See you later.